They said she walked away with nothing. The tabloids called her the discarded trophy wife. When Elena Vance signed the divorce papers at 10:00 a.m. inside the Manhattan Supreme Court, she lost her home, her status, and her husband of 10 years to a woman half her age. Her ex-husband, tech mogul Julian Thorne, thought he had destroyed her. He thought she was leaving the courthouse to cry in a taxi. He was wrong. At 10:15 a.m., Elena didn't hail a cab. She boarded a $60 million Gulfstream G650 belonging to the one man Julian Thorne feared most. This isn't a story about heartbreak. This is a story about the most expensive revenge plan in history. The fluorescent lights of the Manhattan Supreme Court always hummed with a specific frequency of misery. It was a sound Elena Vance had grown used to over the last 6 months of litigation. She sat perfectly still at the mahogany table, her hands folded over a thick stack of documents. She wore a charcoal pencil skirt and a white silk blouse, austere, simple, professional. No jewelry. Specifically, no wedding ring. Across the table sat Julian Thorne. Even after 10 years, he was undeniably handsome, with the kind of sharp, predatory jawline that looked great on the cover of Forbes. He was whispering something to his lead attorney, a pit bull of a man named Prescott, and chuckling. Elena watched the vibration in Julian's chest. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit, the one she had picked out for him in Milan 3 years ago. He looked like a winner, and on paper he was. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, looking over his spectacles, "and Ms. Vance, we are ready to finalize the settlement. I understand all parties have agreed to the stipulations regarding the prenuptial updates." Prescott leaned forward, his voice oily. "Yes, Your Honor. My client is generous. Despite the lack of contribution to the Thorne empire during the marriage, Mr. Thorne has agreed to a one-time payout of $50,000 provided Ms. Vance vacates the Tribeca penthouse by midnight tonight." $50,000. It was an insult. It was less than Julian spent on wine in a month. It was designed to hurt. Julian turned his head, locking eyes with Elena. His eyes were cold blue ice. He mouthed a single word: checkmate. He expected her to fight. He expected her to scream, to cry, to beg for the summer house in the Hamptons or the vintage Jaguar. He wanted a scene. He fed on her emotional devastation. It made him feel powerful. Elena picked up the heavy fountain pen. She didn't look at Julian. She didn't look at Prescott. She looked at the signature line. Elena Vance. She signed her name with a steady hand. The scratch of the nib against the paper was the only sound in the room. "Is that it?" Julian asked aloud, his voice echoing slightly. No hysterics. No begging. Elena capped the pen and set it down gently. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. She looked at the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor." Then she looked at Julian. For the first time in months, she smiled. It wasn't a sad smile. It was a small, terrifyingly calm curve of her lips. "Keep the money, Julian," she said softly. "You're going to need it." She turned and walked toward the double doors. "Elena." Julian barked, his ego bruised by her lack of reaction. "Don't walk away from me. Where are you going to go? You have nothing. You are nobody without me." She didn't pause. She pushed the doors open and stepped into the hallway. The moment the doors closed behind her, the silence of the corridor enveloped her. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of floor wax and old wood. She reached into her purse and pulled out a burner phone, a cheap disposable black rectangle. There was one saved number. She pressed dial. It rang once. "It's done," she said. A deep, gravelly voice on the other end answered immediately. "Is the ink dry?" "Yes." "Walk out the south exit, not the main front doors. The press is swarming the front. The south exit is clear." "I want the press to see me," Elena said, her voice hardening. There was a pause on the line. "Elena, stick to the protocol." "No," she said. "Julian needs to see this. The world needs to see this. I'm going out the front." She hung up before the voice could argue. She put on her oversized sunglasses, adjusted her bag, and began the long walk toward the main entrance. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the marble floor. Click, click, click. It sounded like a countdown. As she pushed through the heavy revolving doors and stepped out onto the steps of the courthouse, the world exploded in flashes of white light. Elena, over here. How does it feel to be homeless? Did Julian cheat on you with the model? The paparazzi were a wall of noise. The rain was falling in a steady gray drizzle, slicking the pavement. Elena stopped at the top of the stairs. She saw Julian's driver waiting at the curb with the Rolls-Royce looking smug. But she didn't look at the Rolls. She looked up at the sky. The heavy thrum of an engine cut through the noise of the screaming photographers. It wasn't a car engine. It was a turbine. Everyone looked up. Descending through the low cloud cover banking sharply over the East River was a helicopter. But not just any helicopter. It was a Sikorsky S-76 painted in a matte black finish with a subtle silver stripe. It looked military. It looked dangerous. It didn't land on the street that would be illegal. Instead, it hovered momentarily over the nearby helipad on the pier, just visible from the courthouse steps, while a convoy of 3 black Cadillac Escalades screeched around the corner, blocking traffic. Men in suits with earpieces jumped out of the Escalades. They weren't police. They were private security. They moved with lethal efficiency, parting the sea of paparazzi like the Red Sea. One of the men, a giant with a scar running through his eyebrow, stopped in front of Elena. He held a large black umbrella over her head. "Ms. Vance," he said. "Mr. Sterling is waiting." The name rippled through the crowd of reporters like a shockwave. Sterling, Silas Sterling. The photographers went berserk. Julian Thorne was a millionaire tech bro. Silas Sterling was an industrial titan, a man whose family had built railroads and steel mills before pivoting to aerospace and defense. He was worth 50 Julians. And he was Julian's sworn enemy. Elena nodded to the bodyguard. "Let's go." She walked down the steps, flanked by the security team. As she reached the sidewalk, the courthouse doors burst open behind her. Julian Thorne ran out, looking disheveled. "Elena!" he screamed, seeing the Escalades. "Who the hell?" Elena paused at the open door of the lead SUV. She turned back one last time. Julian was standing in the rain, getting soaked, looking small and confused. She slipped into the leather interior of the car. The door slammed shut with a heavy, reassuring thud. The convoy sped off, leaving Julian Thorne standing in the rain, realizing for the first time that he hadn't won anything at all. The drive to Teterboro Airport took 20 minutes in the silenced cabin of the Escalade. Elena didn't speak. She watched the city blur past the tinted windows. Her hands, previously steady, were now trembling slightly in her lap. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a cold, hard reality. She had just burned her life to the ground. The car swept onto the tarmac, bypassing the main terminal and heading toward a private hangar marked with a discreet S logo. And there it was, the Gulfstream G650ER. It was sleek, silver, and predatory, its engines already whining with potential energy. The stairs were down. The bodyguard opened her door. "Straight up the stairs, Ms. Vance. Wheels up in 3 minutes." Elena stepped out into the wind of the airfield. She climbed the stairs, the smell of jet fuel filling her nose. The interior of the jet smelled like leather and sandalwood. It was dimly lit, more like a lounge in a high-end club than an airplane. There were no rows of seats, just cream-colored divans, a mahogany bar, and a single figure sitting in a high-back leather chair near the window reading a physical newspaper. Silas Sterling. He didn't look up immediately. He was older than Julian, perhaps 42, with salt and pepper hair cut short and military precise. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that looked like they had been carved out of granite. He wasn't wearing a tie. "You went out the front door," Silas said, his voice low and rumbling, still not looking up from the paper. Elena dropped her purse on the divan opposite him. "I told you. I wanted him to see." Silas finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, almost black, and possessed an intensity that made most people look away. He folded the newspaper slowly and set it aside. That was risky, Elena. If Julian's lawyers had seen the security detail, they could have filed an emergency motion to freeze the divorce decree claiming hidden assets or collusion. They didn't, Elena said, sitting down. She felt exhausted. Julian was too busy gloating. He thinks he left me destitute. And the payout. $50,000. And I have to vacate the apartment tonight. Silas let out a short, dry laugh. He stood up and walked to the bar. $50,000. That won't even cover the fuel for this flight to Geneva. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He walked over and handed one to her. Whiskey. Neat. You look like you need it. Elena took the glass. Her fingers brushed his. There was a static charge there, a history that the cameras back at the courthouse didn't know about. Where are we going, Silas? She asked, taking a sip. The liquor burned pleasantly. Geneva first, then Singapore, Silas said, sitting back down. The board meeting for Thorne Dynamics is in 3 days. We need to be ready. Elena closed her eyes. Thorne Dynamics, Julian's baby. Not his baby, Silas corrected sharply. His stolen empire, and you are the key to taking it back. The plane lurched slightly as it began to taxi. Did you get the file? Elena asked, opening her eyes. Silas nodded. He reached under his seat and pulled out a thick black folder. He tossed it onto the table between them. Everything you copied from his private server before you left the house 3 months ago, Silas said. The offshore accounts, the bribes to the FDA regulators for his new biotech chip, the blackmail on the senators. It's all here. Elena looked at the folder. That folder was the reason she had stayed quiet during the divorce hearings. It was the reason she had let Julian humiliate her, call her lazy, and paint her as a gold digger. She needed him to think she was stupid. She needed him to think she was weak. If Julian knew she had this data, she wouldn't be on a jet. She would be at the bottom of the Hudson River. He's going to know soon, Elena whispered. Once he realizes his server login doesn't work. He won't know until it's too late, Silas said. By the time we land in Geneva, my team will have already moved the shell companies. By tomorrow morning, Julian won't be the majority shareholder of his own company anymore. Silas leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers. But you have to be sure, Elena. Once we take off, there is no turning back. You are declaring war on a man who has the resources to hire hitmen. You are effectively dead to your old life. Elena looked out the window. The plane was accelerating now, the force pressing her back into the seat. She watched the gray skyline of New York begin to tilt. Somewhere down there, Julian was probably popping champagne, celebrating his victory over his quiet, obedient wife. She remembered the nights he would come home smelling of other women's perfume. She remembered the way he belittled her intelligence in front of their friends. She remembered how he had tricked her father into signing over the family patents right before her father died of a stroke. She looked back at Silas. I'm not dead, Silas, she said, her voice steady. I'm just waking up. The jet lifted off the ground, banking steep and fast, climbing toward the clouds. Silas raised his glass. To the end of Julian Thorne. Elena clinked her glass against his. To the end. But as they reached cruising altitude, Elena's phone, the burner she hadn't destroyed yet, buzzed. She frowned. Only Silas knew this number. And Silas was sitting right in front of her. She picked it up. A text message. Unknown number. She opened it. The blood drained from her face. Attached was a photo. It was a grainy, long-distance shot of Elena and Silas sitting on the jet, taken from inside the hangar just minutes ago. The text underneath read, "Did you really think you could leave without saying goodbye, Mrs. Thorne? I see you. And I see who you're with. The game has just begun." Elena dropped the phone. "What is it?" Silas asked, instantly alert. "Someone was in the hangar," Elena whispered. "Someone knows." Silas grabbed the phone. He read the text. His jaw tightened. He stood up and walked to the cockpit door, banging on it. "Pilot!" Silas roared. "Scan the cabin for bugs. Now." He turned back to Elena, his face grim. "Julian is smarter than we thought," Silas said. "Or he has help." The cabin of the Gulfstream G650ER, usually a sanctuary of quiet luxury, was now a buzzing hive of urgent activity. The two pilots, their faces etched with concern, emerged from the cockpit, carrying sophisticated electronic scanning equipment. Two more of Silas's security detail, imposing figures with tightly coiled alertness, began systematically searching every crevice of the private jet. Elena watched them, her heart hammering against her ribs. The image on the burner phone, her and Silas clear as day, taken covertly, played on a loop in her mind. Who? And more terrifyingly, when Silas was on his satellite phone, his voice a low, furious rumble. "I want a full sweep of Teterborough's private hangars. Every employee, every security log, every camera feed. Focus on Hangar S. I want to know who was there, now, and cross-reference all personnel with Thorne Dynamics payroll." He ended the call, his face a mask of controlled fury. He walked back to Elena, taking the seat opposite her. "This changes things," he said, his voice clipped. "Julian knows. He knows you're with me. He knows we're working together. And that means he knows whatever we're planning involves him. He'll be preparing a defense, or worse, an offensive." "How could he know, Silas?" Elena pressed, her voice trembling. "Only a handful of people knew about this flight. Your closest circle. My former lawyers, Prescott, they wouldn't link me to you." Silas ran a hand through his short hair, a rare sign of his agitation. "My team is tight, Elena. Ironclad. But Julian Thorne is also a formidable opponent, especially when cornered. He's built an empire on ruthless foresight and cutting-edge surveillance. It's possible he had eyes or ears in my organization, or even yours, for months waiting for a trigger." "But the photo," Elena insisted. "It was taken inside the hangar just before we took off. That means someone was either there or had access to a camera feed within your secured facility." One of the security guards approached, holding a small metallic device. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Vance, we found this." He held up what looked like a miniature USB drive, barely an inch long, cleverly disguised as a discarded paperclip. "It's a burst transmitter, high-frequency short-range. Someone planted it on the undercarriage of the jet. It would have sent a quick burst of data once we powered up." Silas took the device, examining it with narrowed eyes. "Amateur hour, but effective. This wouldn't have been from a sophisticated intelligence agency. This is something Julian could have bought online and given to a grunt." "But who planted it?" Elena asked. "The security at your private hangar is supposed to be impenetrable." "It is," Silas affirmed, his gaze steely. "Which means it wasn't an outsider. It was someone with access. Someone on the inside." He turned to one of his pilots. "Run a full diagnostic on all onboard systems. Check for any anomalies, any unscheduled maintenance logs in the last 24 hours. The pilot nodded, returning to the cockpit. Suddenly, the plane's internal communication system chimed. "Mr. Sterling, a news alert just broke. You'll want to see this." Silas activated the large screen that retracted from the ceiling. The screen flickered to life, showing a live broadcast from Global News Network. The anchorwoman, looking grave, spoke into the camera. "We're just getting word of a developing story out of New York. In a stunning twist to the high-profile divorce of tech billionaire Julian Thorne and his now ex-wife Elena Vance, it appears the story is far from over. Our sources confirm that just minutes after leaving the courthouse, Ms. Vance was seen boarding a private jet belonging to none other than industrialist Silas Sterling." A grainy, slightly zoomed-in version of the photo Elena had received on her burner phone flashed across the screen. "This image," the anchor continued, "provided anonymously to GNN, shows Ms. Vance and Mr. Sterling inside the Sterling family's private hangar at Teterboro moments before their flight departed. This raises serious questions about the nature of their relationship and the true financial standings of Ms. Vance. Is this a new romance, or something far more complex involving the long-standing rivalry between Mr. Thorne and Mr. Sterling? The chat in the news channel's live feed was already exploding. Had Thorne Vance divorce Nashash Silas, Sterling Tasha revenge plot were trending. Silas turned off the screen, his face a thundercloud. He leaked it. As soon as he knew, he leaked it to control the narrative. Make it look like you're some mercenary jumping from one billionaire to another. He's trying to discredit me before we can even begin. Elena realized, her voice tight with anger. He wants to paint me as a gold digger, a betrayer to undermine anything I might say about him or Thorne Dynamics. Precisely, Silas said. He's buying time, and he's manipulating public opinion. This makes our job harder. The board of Thorne Dynamics will be less likely to listen to accusations from someone they perceive as a scorned ex-wife seeking revenge with a new rich benefactor. Elena took a deep breath. Then we move faster. We can't let him control the narrative. We need to counter. Silas looked at her, a flicker of admiration in his dark eyes. You're learning quickly, Elena. Good, we will. But first we need to understand how deep this infiltration goes. He picked up the burner phone again and looked at the anonymous text message. That phrase, "The game has just begun," that's not Julian's style. He's more, "I won, you lost." This feels theatrical. He's been watching too many spy movies. Elena muttered, a dry humor cutting through her fear. Or someone else is feeding him lines. Silas countered, his eyes narrowing. Someone who thinks this is a game. Someone who knows things about both of us, about our past. The plane leveled out at cruising altitude, the hum of the engines a steady drone. Below them, the Atlantic stretched out, an endless expanse of gray. They were flying into the unknown, but the game, as the anonymous sender had said, was indeed just beginning. And it was clear now that Julian Thorne was not their only opponent. Silas's intelligence network worked with chilling speed. By the time they were halfway across the Atlantic, new information was filtering in. "We have a hit," Silas announced, coming back from a private conversation with his chief of security. A recently hired junior technician at Teterboro, a Kyle Jensen. He was brought on board 3 weeks ago through a temp agency. Elena frowned. "A temp? How would he get access to your private hangar?" "He was on a night shift rotation," Silas explained, looking at a digital file on his tablet. "Scheduled to do inventory checks on avionics equipment in the S hangar. He would have had authorized access, and he would have been alone. And the background check, clean as a whistle." Silas admitted, a muscle jumping in his jaw. "Which is almost too clean. No social media, no criminal record, no obvious affiliations. He vanished an hour after the GNN report broke. His rental apartment is empty. He used a fake ID to get the temp job." "So a ghost," Elena said. "A very well-placed ghost," Silas agreed. "And Julian Thorne is not subtle enough to create a ghost this effective. He'd hire a thug, not a phantom." This confirmed Silas's growing suspicion Julian had help. Someone far more sophisticated. "You mentioned a rivalry, Silas, between you and Julian," Elena ventured, picking at the label on her whiskey glass. "Is there anyone else who might want to see Julian fall? Someone who would be clever enough to play both sides?" Silas looked out the window, his gaze distant. "Julian has a lot of enemies, Elena. He's climbed over many people to get where he is. But very few of them operate with this level of precision and theatricality. This isn't just about business. This feels personal." "What about the patent?" Elena asked, bringing up the painful memory. "My father's patent. Thorne Dynamics was built on it. You tried to buy it, didn't you?" Silas turned back to her. "Your father, Arthur Vance, was a brilliant man. His cold fusion patent could have revolutionized energy. I tried for years to acquire it legally. I knew what it was worth. But Julian..." Julian got to him first. He sweet-talked Arthur, promised him the world, then manipulated him into signing it over just weeks before he died. It was predatory. And you lost out, Elena finished. You lost a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. To Julian. Silas nodded. That patent, Elena, was the cornerstone of Thorne Dynamics' early success. It allowed Julian to pivot from a small software startup to a global energy and tech powerhouse. And it fueled my rivalry with him. I saw what he did to your father, how he stole Arthur's legacy. It was a wound that never healed. Elena remembered her father, frail and confused in the months before his death, raving about Julian's vision and friendship. She had always been suspicious, but Julian had been so convincing, so charming. She had been too young, too naive, too blinded by her love for him. Now she realized it had been a calculated deception from the start. So this isn't just about revenge for me, Elena said, a new resolve hardening her voice. This is about justice for my father, and for you. Among other things, Silas admitted, a grim smile touching his lips. But there is someone else. Another ghost, perhaps. Julian's first wife, Anya Thorne. She disappeared almost 15 years ago. Vanished without a trace right before Thorne Dynamics went public. Many believe Julian had her silenced. The official story was a mental breakdown and voluntary institutionalization. But no one ever saw her again. Elena gasped. Anya Thorne, I barely remember hearing about her. Julian erased her from his history. He tried, Silas said. But some things don't erase so easily. Anya was a brilliant physicist involved in the early stages of your father's fusion research. She was the one who introduced Julian to your father. She knew the patent better than anyone, even Julian, and she was passionate about its ethical applications. Are you saying Anya Thorne could be behind this? Elena asked, her mind racing. The text message. The game has just begun. The theatricality. It sounds like something a wronged person fueled by a long-held grudge might say. Silas stared at her, his dark eyes intense. It's a long shot. She's presumed dead by most. But if Anya Thorne were alive, and if she knew what Julian had done, not just to her but to your father's legacy, she would be a formidable opponent. She had access to all of Julian's early schemes, all the dirt. And she was a genius in her own right. The implications were staggering. If Anya Thorne was alive and working with or even manipulating Julian, then the game was far more intricate than Elena had imagined. It wasn't a simple revenge plot. It was a multi-layered chess match with players lurking in the shadows. So what do we do? Elena asked, leaning forward, suddenly energized by the new complexity. If Anya is involved, how do we find her? How do we use this against Julian? Silas leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. If Anya is alive, she's likely been operating in the shadows for a long time. She'll be untraceable, but her fingerprints would be on the method of attack, the precision, the information, the psychological warfare. He picked up the burner phone again, staring at the text message and the photo. Julian wouldn't have known what to do with this image on his own. He would have just sent it to GNN. But the message, I see you, and I see who you're with. The game has just begun. That's a direct taunt, not just to us, but to Julian himself. What do you mean? Elena asked. Julian is a control freak, Silas explained. He would never allow anyone else to phrase his threats. He would take full credit. This message implies a third party, someone who isn't just helping Julian, but who is perhaps sending a message to us about Julian through Julian. A double cross, Elena whispered. Perhaps. Or a shadow player with their own agenda, Silas mused. But if Anya is indeed involved, this changes our strategy. We need to not just expose Julian, but also understand who else is pulling the strings. This is no longer just about Thorne Dynamics. This is about a much older, deeper conspiracy. Silas stood up, walking to the large table where he had laid out various maps and documents. He pulled out a large, intricate diagram of the Thorne Dynamics corporate structure. Our original plan was to hit Thorne Dynamics where it hurts the financial fraud and regulatory bribes, Silas said, pointing to various subsidiaries. But if Anya Thorne is alive, she holds the key to the very foundation of Julian's empire. Not just the fraud, but the original acquisition of your father's patent. The legal loophole, the deception. Elena walked over, looking at the complex web of companies. So we don't just destabilize him, we unravel him. Silas looked at her, a glint in his dark eyes. Precisely. We don't just take his money, we take his legacy. And we find out who else is playing this game. The jet continued its silent journey across the vast ocean, carrying with it two determined individuals and the explosive secrets of Julian Thorne's past. The game had indeed begun, and it was quickly becoming clear that the stakes were far higher and the players far more numerous than anyone had initially anticipated. The Gulfstream G650ER touched down at Geneva Airport GVA under a canopy of heavy slate-gray clouds. The Swiss air was crisp, smelling of rain and pine, a sharp contrast to the humid exhaust fumes of Teterboro. As the jet taxied to the private aviation terminal, Silas's security team was already in motion. They moved with a synchronized lethality, checking the perimeter, scanning for long-range lenses, and securing the 3 armored Mercedes-Maybach sedans waiting on the tarmac. Elena watched the rain streak against the porthole window. "Does Julian know we're here?" Silas adjusted his cufflinks, onyx and silver. "He knows we left New York. He likely assumes we're heading to a non-extradition country or a tax haven. Geneva is bold. Geneva is where the money lives. He'll figure it out soon enough, but we have a head start. Maybe 4 hours. 4 hours to do what? To rob him," Silas said calmly, standing up. "Or rather, to reclaim what he hid." The convoy sped out of the airport, merging onto the smooth Swiss highways, heading not toward the city center, but toward the industrial edge of the canton. They were heading to the Geneva Free Ports, a massive fortress-like warehouse complex, where billionaires stored art, gold, and sensitive documents tax-free, away from the prying eyes of governments and ex-spouses. "Julian has a vault here," Elena said, realization dawning on her. That's what was in the encrypted files. The lease agreement for a climate-controlled unit. Unit 77B, Silas confirmed, checking his tablet. Leased under a shell company called Jormungandr Holdings. A little Norse mythology, the serpent that eats the world. Julian always did have a flair for the dramatic. "But we can't just walk in," Elena argued. "The Freeports have biometric security, retinal scans, handprints." Silas smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "Julian is arrogant, Elena. He thinks he's the only one who can plan ahead. But when your father signed over the patents, he didn't just sign papers. He gave Julian a physical master key, a prototype drive that contains the source code for the fusion algorithm. Julian keeps that drive in the Freeport because he doesn't trust the cloud. He's paranoid about hackers. And, Silas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He upended it, and a heavy titanium signet ring fell into his palm. It bore the crest of the Vance family. Elena gasped. "My father's ring. I thought it was buried with him." "It was supposed to be," Silas said softly. "But Julian took it off his finger at the hospital. He kept it as a trophy. One of my operatives recovered it from Julian's safe in the Hamptons last night while Julian was busy screaming at his lawyers." Elena took the ring. It was cold and heavy. "This opens the vault." "It contains an RFID chip," Silas explained. "Old tech, but unhackable. Your father embedded it in the ring in case he ever got locked out of his own lab. Julian uses it as the physical key for the vault override." The car slowed to a halt in front of the imposing gray concrete structure of the Freeport. Security was tighter than a maximum security prison. Elena and Silas stepped out. The rain had turned into a mist. Silas draped a trench coat over Elena's shoulders. "Shoulders back, head high. You own this place." They approached the steel doors. The guards, recognizing the aura of immense wealth and power, stiffened. Silas presented a falsified authorization form, impeccable forgery work claiming they were auditors for Jormungandr Holdings. They were escorted through a maze of corridors past rooms holding Picassos and Roman antiquities until they reached the lower levels. The air was recycled and cool. Unit 77B. It was a massive steel door with no handle, just a scanner and a small indentation for a physical object. "The moment of truth," Silas whispered. Elena stepped forward. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from rage. This was her father's legacy, locked away in a dark box by the man who had ruined him. She pressed the signet ring into the indentation. A soft click. Then a mechanical whir. Green lights flashed. The heavy bolts retracted with a thud that echoed in the silence. The door swung open. Elena expected stacks of cash or gold bars. Instead, the room was surprisingly sparse. There was a single pedestal in the center holding a silver hard drive encased in glass. But that wasn't what caught her eye. On the walls of the vault, taped up with surgical precision, were photos. Hundreds of them. Elena walked closer, her breath hitching in her throat. They were photos of her. Elena walking the dog. Elena at the grocery store. Elena sleeping in the guest room. Elena crying in the park. "He's been watching me," she whispered, horrified. "For years." "He wasn't just watching," Silas said, his voice grim, pointing to a second set of photos on the opposite wall. These photos were older, grainy. They showed a woman with dark hair and sharp features laughing, working in a lab, arguing in a cafe. Anya Thorne. And between the photos of Elena and Anya were red strings connecting dates, locations, and financial transactions. He was comparing us, Elena realized, feeling a wave of nausea. He was trying to recreate her. He married me because I reminded him of her, or because he needed something from me that she wouldn't give him. Silas moved to the pedestal, but he didn't touch the drive. He was looking at a small, handwritten note left on top of the glass case. "Elena," Silas said urgently, "look at this." Elena tore her eyes away from the creepy shrine of photos. She looked at the note. It wasn't in Julian's handwriting. Julian's script was jagged and rushed. This handwriting was elegant, looped, and precise. The note read, "You're late, Silas. I expected you to find the ring sooner. But don't worry, I took the source code. You can have the shrine." Elena looked at the glass case. It was empty. The hard drive was a decoy, just a hollow shell. "She was here," Elena breathed. "Anya, she's alive, and she beat us to it." Silas slammed his hand against the steel wall, the sound ringing like a gunshot. "She's playing us. She knew we would come for the code. She used us to flush Julian out, and while we were distracting him, she raided the vault." "But how?" Elena asked. "How did she get in without the ring?" "Because she helped build the security system," Silas growled. 15 years ago, she didn't need a key. She wrote the lock." Suddenly the lights in the vault flickered and turned red. A siren began to wail, a low, ear-splitting thrum. "Silent alarm," Silas snapped. "She triggered it on her way out, or she rigged it to trigger once we entered. We have to go. Now." "The police?" "Worse. Private security mercenaries on Julian's payroll. They monitor this facility." Silas grabbed Elena's hand. They ran out of the vault, leaving the creepy collage of obsessions behind. They sprinted through the corridors, the sound of heavy boots echoing from the stairwell ahead. "South exit," Silas shouted to his head of security, who was waiting by the elevator. "We're burned Route B." They burst out into the rainy Geneva afternoon, just as two black SUVs with tinted windows screeched around the corner, blocking the main gate. Men with assault rifles spilled out. "Get in!" Silas shoved Elena into the back of the Maybach. The driver slammed the accelerator before the door was fully closed. The heavy car fishtailed on the wet pavement tires, smoking, and roared toward the secondary exit, smashing through a wooden barrier arm. Elena looked back through the rear window. The mercenaries weren't firing too many witnesses, but they were scrambling back into their vehicles to give chase. "We didn't get the code," Elena said, her chest heaving. "We failed." Silas pulled out his phone, his eyes scanning the map of Geneva. "No, we didn't fail. We just confirmed the most dangerous variable in this equation." He looked at Elena. "Anya Thorne isn't just alive. She has the source code for the most valuable energy technology on the planet, and now she's in the wind." "Where would she go?" Elena asked. Silas looked at the rain-swept city passing by in a blur. "There's only one place she can use that code to destroy Julian without destroying herself. The board meeting in Singapore. She's going to the finish line." The escape from the Geneva Freeport was a blur of rain-slicked asphalt and burning rubber. Silas's driver, a stoic professional, navigated the armored Maybach through the winding industrial backstreets, losing the pursuing mercenaries in a subterranean parking structure beneath the old town. By the time they reached the safe house, a glass-fronted chalet overlooking the dark expanse of Lake Geneva, the adrenaline had faded, leaving a cold, sharp clarity in its wake. Elena stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, wrapping her arms around herself. She wasn't shaking from the cold. She was shaking from what she had seen in the vault. The photos, the timelines, the realization that Julian hadn't just married her, he had curated her. "He was trying to replace her," Elena whispered, watching the rain lash against the glass. "He was trying to turn me into Anya." Silas stood behind her, looking at a tablet. "And he failed. Because Anya Thorne isn't dead. She's alive, she's angry, and she just stole the only leverage we had." "So we lost," Elena said flatly. "She has the source code. She can burn the company to the ground." "Not yet." Silas corrected, his mind working like a grandmaster assessing a chessboard. "If Anya wanted to destroy Thorne Dynamics, she would have leaked the code online the moment she walked out of that vault. She didn't. She's holding it. She's waiting for a specific moment." The Singapore board meeting, Elena realized. "Exactly. But we can't just chase her to Singapore. We need to flush her out now. We need to know whose side she's on before we walk into the lion's den." Silas walked over to a sleek black garment bag that had been delivered by a courier 10 minutes prior. He unzipped it. Inside hung a gown of deep blood-red silk. It was architectural, severe, and stunning. It was a dress designed to stop traffic or a heart. "Tonight is the World Energy Gala at the Hotel President Wilson," Silas said. "Julian's proxies will be there. His lawyers, his investors. He's watching via live stream." "You want me to go?" "I want us to go," Silas said. "We walk in through the front door. We let the world see us. We let Julian see us. We declare war in high definition. If Anya is in Geneva, she won't be able to resist watching Julian squirm. She'll be there." Elena touched the silk. It felt like liquid armor. "I'm done hiding, Silas. Let's go." 2 hours later, the ballroom of the Hotel President Wilson was a suffocating crush of diamonds, tuxedos, and polite hypocrisy. The air smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. The elite of the energy world were murmuring about the rumors, the divorce, the stock drop, the missing CEO. Then the room went silent. At the top of the grand staircase, Elena Vance appeared. She wore the red dress. It fit her like a second skin, the crimson fabric a violent contrast to the sea of black tuxedos. She didn't look like a discarded trophy wife. She looked like a queen returning from exile to execute the traitors. Beside her, Silas Sterling looked lethal in midnight blue. They descended the stairs, the crowd parting for them like the Red Sea. "Mr. Sterling," a voice sneered. It was Prescott Julian's lead attorney. The man looked sweaty, his eyes darting nervously toward the cameras. "And, Ms. Vance, bold of you to show your face. The police are asking questions about a break-in at the Freeport." "Let them ask," Elena said, her voice carrying over the hushed crowd. She stepped closer to Prescott, towering over him in her heels. "They might be interested to see the shrine your client keeps in his vault. Tell Julian I saw the photos, Prescott. Tell him I know about Anya. Prescott's face drained of color. The glass of champagne in his hand trembled. You're playing a dangerous game, he hissed. The check bounced, Prescott. Elena smiled ice cold. The game is over. She turned her back on him, leaving him gaping as the photographers went wild. Silas guided her toward the terrace, away from the suffocating heat of the room. The night air off the lake was cool. Elena gripped the stone railing, letting out a breath she felt she'd been holding for hours. You were perfect, Silas murmured. I'm terrified, she admitted. Do you think she's here? I know she is, a raspy voice said from the shadows. Elena spun around. Standing in the corner, half hidden by a potted palm, was a member of the catering staff. She wore a black vest and held a tray of empty glasses. Her hair was gray and cropped short, her face lined with years of hard living, but the eyes were unmistakable. Anya Thorne. Silas moved to shield Elena, but Anya waved a hand dismissively. Relax, Sterling. If I wanted you dead, I would have poisoned your drink an hour ago. You took the drive, Silas said, stepping forward. Give us the code, Anya. We can use it to save the company. Save it! Anya laughed, a bitter, broken sound. I don't want to save it. I want to nuke it. I built that code with Arthur Vance. Julian stole it. He stole my life. He stole my life too, Elena said, stepping out from behind Silas. And he stole my father's legacy. Anya looked at Elena, her gaze softening slightly as she took in the red dress. You have Arthur's chin and his stubbornness. She reached into her apron pocket. She pulled out a small black data card. I'm not going to give you the source code, Anya said. The code is just math. Math doesn't put men like Julian in prison. Math just makes them bankrupt. They bounce back from bankruptcy. She tossed the card to Silas. What is this? Silas asked. The truth, Anya said. You think Arthur died of a stroke? Julian paid off the coroner. That drive contains the original toxicology report from the Geneva Institute. Arthur was poisoned, Elena. Thallium, administered over 6 months. The world tilted on its axis. Elena grabbed the railing to steady herself. Murder. It wasn't just theft. It was cold-blooded murder. He killed him, Elena whispered. He killed the obstacle, Anya said. Just like he tried to kill me by locking me away in a sanitarium. I'm going underground. I can't get close to him. His biometrics will flag me. But you, she pointed at Elena, you are the cover star. You have the invite to the Singapore vote. Take the drive, Anya commanded. Go to Singapore. Don't just fire him. Bury him. Before they could ask another question, Anya stepped back into the shadows. The game has just begun, Elena. Make sure you win. She slipped back into the crowded ballroom, vanishing like a ghost. Silas looked at the small black card in his hand. It felt heavier than lead. Get the jet ready, Elena said, her voice trembling with a new terrifying power. The fear was gone, burned away by a white-hot need for justice. We're going to Singapore, and I'm going to look him in the eyes when I end him. The humidity of Singapore hit them like a physical blow, but Elena Vance was shivering. She sat in the back of the armored SUV, staring at the shimmering silhouette of the Marina Bay Sands. Inside that hotel, Julian Thorne was about to initiate a vote that would seal his control over the company forever. He's instituted a total media blackout, Silas said, typing furiously on his secure tablet. No phones inside. He knows the stock is wobbling. He needs to force this merger in the dark. Elena smoothed the lapel of her suit. She had chosen stark, blinding white, the color of mourning in the east, the color of judgment in the west. Can we get in? We own the hotel security back door, Silas said, closing the laptop. We don't just get in, Elena. We take over. Inside the grand ballroom, Julian Thorne was preaching. He paced the stage, manic and sweating, his voice booming over the sound system. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the Thorne Dynamics logo. They want to steal our future. Julian shouted to the 500 captive shareholders. "But the Horizon project is mine. I built this. I am the only one who can save it." The crowd applauded, swayed by his desperation. "We vote now!" Julian screamed. "Secure the legacy!" Suddenly the speaker screeched with feedback. The massive screen flickered, the logo dissolving into static. "Don't cut the feed!" A voice rang out from the back of the room. The double doors crashed open. Elena Vance walked in, flanked by Silas Sterling and 4 private security operatives. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. "Elena!" Julian laughed nervously into his headset. "Security, escort my ex-wife out. She's clearly having a breakdown." "I'm not here for a settlement, Julian," Elena said, her voice calm, amplified by a microphone Silas had handed her. She walked down the center aisle, a ghost in white. "I'm here for the autopsy." Julian froze. "What?" "My father's autopsy," Elena said, stopping at the foot of the stage. "The one you paid $2 million to suppress." Silas tapped his tablet. The screen behind Julian shifted. It wasn't a logo anymore. It was a document from the Geneva Institute of Forensic Toxicology. "Thallium," Elena read aloud, her voice echoing in the cavernous hall. "A heavy metal poison. Tasteless. Odorless. It mimics a stroke. You didn't just steal my father's company, Julian. You murdered him to get it." The room erupted. Shareholders gasped, craning their necks to see the chemical breakdown projected in high definition. "Lies!" Julian screamed, his face turning purple. "This is AI. This is a Sterling fabrication. And the emails." Silas's deep voice cut through the chaos. "The purchase orders from the dark web. The dates match Arthur Vance's hospitalization exactly." Julian looked at the audience. The adoration was gone, replaced by horror. He looked at the exits blocked by Silas's men. He looked at Elena, and for the first time he didn't see a trophy. He saw the executioner. "I made you!" Julian shrieked, his sanity fracturing. "You were nothing. I gave you a life." "You gave me a cage," Elena said softly. "And I just broke the lock." Julian snapped. With a feral roar, he leaped from the stage, aiming for Elena's throat. He never made it. Silas moved with terrifying speed, intercepting Julian in midair and slamming him into the plush carpet. The impact shook the floor. Before Julian could scramble up, the side doors burst open. The Singapore police force flooded the room. "Julian Thorne," a captain shouted, hauling the billionaire to his feet. "You are under arrest for murder and corporate fraud." As they dragged him away, kicking and screaming about his legacy, Elena stood perfectly still. She didn't look away. She watched until the doors closed, leaving her standing in the wreckage of his empire. 3 hours later, the Gulfstream G650ER was climbing through the clouds, leaving the lights of Singapore far below. Elena sat by the window watching the stars appear. Her burner phone buzzed one last time. "He's in custody. I'm going off the grid. Nice suit." Elena deleted the message. Anya was free, and so was she. Silas set 2 glasses of whiskey on the table. "The board is gone. The patents are being released to the public domain tomorrow. You did it, Elena." "We did it," she corrected. She took a sip, the warmth spreading through her chest. "So what now? The war is over." Silas smiled, and it reached his eyes. "The war is over. But I have a project starting in Tokyo. Sustainable cities. It's going to be a fight." Elena looked at him, really looked at him. "I'm getting pretty good at fights." "Then buckle up," Silas said, raising his glass. "We're just getting started." The jet banked toward the horizon, flying straight into the dawn. And that is how Elena Vance walked out of a divorce hearing with nothing, and ended up taking down a corrupt empire. Julian thought he was playing chess, but he didn't realize he was playing against a woman who knew his every move. Justice was served, but it cost everything to get there. What do you think? Did Julian deserve a harsher punishment? Let me know in the comments. If you love this story, please like and subscribe. It helps us create more of these sagas. Next week, the story of a lottery winner who vanished for 10 years. You won't want to miss it.